everybody. Can everybody hear me? Hi, okay, thank you. My name is Laura Betts, and I am with the Clio Institute. I'm the program manager in Central Florida. I will be moderating this event today. Today we are hosting a preview of a short film that was commissioned with the Clio Institute, Jobs for Justice, and the Sierra Club, followed by our conversation with our distinguished panelists. Let me share my screen. Right, can you see? Oops. Stop share for a minute. I have to make sure. Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay. All right. So today's event is brought to you by the Clio Institute, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated exclusively to climate crisis education and advocacy. For over 12 years, we've been working with communities across Florida to build climate literacy and mobilize climate action for a just, resilient future. All of our programs are science-based and vetted with an expert advisory council.
I want you to ask yourselves those tough questions, the ones we avoid: how we want to live, what do we want for our children, what do we want for our planet?
Our atmosphere is so finely tuned for what we need, and we're treating it like a dumping ground, a sewer. The health impact of climate change is a global problem, and we see the results of that on a local level.
If we fail to act now, then we will leave behind a fundamentally degraded planet for our children and grandchildren, a planet that resembles the futures that have been portrayed in dystopian Hollywood films: unprecedented inundation of our coastlines, droughts, floods, heat waves, superstorms. That's the future that we will see if we fail to act on climate.
The Clio Institute was founded in 2010 with the drive to educate and empower South Floridians to act on climate. Founded by Caroline Lewis, a science teacher by training, her vocation led her to understand what was causing people's apathy towards the glooming climate crisis: knowledge.
We're in the middle of the 6th mass extinction.
Today, the Clio Institute is the #1 nonprofit organization for climate education, engagement, and advocacy. Through programs like the Clio Speakers Network, Clio trains people to become climate speakers by breaking down the science, impacts, and solutions. Clio's educational efforts are backed by a world-class expert advisory council of scientists, environmentalists, teachers, and government officials. While the world is already feeling the impacts of our changing climate, not everyone is feeling it the same way. Clio is a leader in the climate justice movement, providing the resources and tools to the most vulnerable communities in South Florida that are on the front lines of the climate crisis.
I wanted to be an outreach for them.
Building communities' resilience through women is the cornerstone of our Empowering Resilient Women program. By teaming up with community members like the YWCA, Clio is able to empower and educate women on how better to prepare for more extreme weather events like hurricanes while building community. Clio works to remove barriers and build a wider coalition to fight climate change across faith-based communities, elected officials, and municipalities, schools, and cultural organizations. One of the most important voices that Clio continues to amplify is that of our youth.
What do we want? When do we want it?
Their Gen Clio program meets regularly with students across the region, training them to be climate ambassadors in their schools and communities.
Dear elected officials,
this is a crisis. Do your job. We'll be watching.
Clio recently launched its Climate Resilient Schools initiative to bring their program into the classrooms while building a robust climate curriculum for Miami-Dade public schools.
I like the Clio Institute because it takes the time to educate people about the importance of climate change and the things that we can do to improve our world.
You can have your voice heard too. Fund our climate action work today. The future of Florida is in your hands.
So today we have with us a distinguished panel. We have Susan Glickman, Florida Director for Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, Jennifer Torres, Environmental Organizer for Puerto Latinx, Piper Vargas, Avalon Park resident, and Moms for Clean Air Force organizer. And before we start, I'd like to just, tell you how we got here today. Several years ago, I was invited to meet with a few mothers from Avalon Park who were meeting to discuss concerns when their children in the neighborhood were coming down with a rare form of cancer. The moms formed a coalition for a clean environment to advocate for transparency and to get answers from OUC. Since then, I've been advocating, since that day, putting the health of families should be first. Okay. And here's our preview.
You know, a lot of people know about the towers and they see it, right? When they drive into Avalon, they drive into their neighborhoods, it's there. And you see the smoke coming out. And a lot of people are told, and there's not untruth to that, that it is steam, but it's not purified drinking water steam. I was so shocked when I learned about it. Like, there's a coal power plant in my backyard. It's toxic, and that's what that means for my family. That shook our world. Like, that just changed everything for us. My name is Piper Vargas. I'm married and have 2 kids, a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. And we are local residents in Orange County, Florida, on the east side of Orlando. So there's two parts of living next to a coal power plant that I learned. So at first, you can see the towers and the smoke coming out. And there is, of course, some things in that are not good for the environment or your health. But then once you burn the coal, where does the waste go? We have coal ash and all of the waste from burning the coal, and that is stored on property at Stanton. That's actually the most dangerous part for children and the health, is that fly ash. There is a 10-mile radius that they consider to be like a danger zone, that, you know, a windstorm could blow that fly ash into your yard or onto your roof or into your grass. There's some data that came out at one time. There's a cluster of cancer cases in that zip code, in the 32828 zip code. And I met with an aunt of one of the children and a mother of a child that has passed from that rare form of cancer. Just meeting with those families that have lost young children was really hard. It's hard to learn something like that and then just go back to ignoring it and having my kids play out here in the backyard and not start wondering, like, well, is there traces of coal ash in my backyard? You know, is this air healthy for my young kids to be breathing in?
of the people that we texted and talked to on the phone actually didn't even know that there was a nearby power plant that was directly affecting their health. Our volunteers are very upset that when they talk to their neighbors and their families that live in these same areas as them, a lot of people don't know still. That's one of the big issues that the community has with OUC is their lack of transparency.
It shocked me when every mom that I met in a group or friends that I had, for years now, that all live within that danger zone and they all have little kids and are pregnant, which are the most vulnerable, and they don't know anything about the ash. We got a report explaining what is coal ash. It was just really hard for us to read those because in one sentence, in one paragraph, it says could be harmful to the environment and health. And then a few paragraphs later, it says that coal ash could be used in your garden. And that's what we're hearing, that it's not something to be concerned about. We shouldn't be concerned because it's not bad for your health. It's not bad for the community.
Avalon, just because it's so close in proximity to the Stanton Energy Center, doesn't mean it's the only community that's affected. The coal ash pollution from OUC is one of the biggest problems for our community as far as environmental justice here in Orlando. The EPA has actually acknowledged that coal plants and power plants that pollute neighborhoods are predominantly located in low-income brown and black neighborhoods. This isn't an accident. This is definitely a justice issue when you look at how many people around this power plant are brown and black, low income, and are unaware of what's going on. And when they do voice their opinions, they're not being listened to when they're the ones that are being directly affected by the things that are theirs.
There are things that they could be doing. There are barriers they can put up, there are covers, there are different measures that they could do. Other states have regulations in place that protect their communities that our state doesn't have. And so because it's not mandated federally and it's not mandated by the state, we don't have covers over the coal ash piles. We were asking for them to put those up to, at minimum, to secure the coal ash.
OUC's efforts to contain the coal ash pollution obviously fall short of what the community needs, and they proudly say that there has been no complaints about it, but they actually don't have a proper method of filing complaints.
If you go on OUC's website, it's very we're clean energy and we're doing all these great things, and the city of Orlando as well has done great things for sustainability and the environment. They've made great progress, but then we still have this coal power plant in our backyard. And so for them not to have that highest standard of keeping the health of the community in place, even if it's not federally or state regulated, that's what we were asking from our mayor and from the city of Orlando to do better. And just because our state doesn't have that, do better and protect the community.
Okay, so before we start, I'd just like to mention, we acknowledge we don't have all the answers, but here's what we do know. Reporting came out, in the news about a cancer cluster in zip codes near the energy plant, which was disputed by Orange County and the Florida Department of Health. And until further testing, we cannot make a clear connection to health issues and the Stanton energy plant. We do know that coal ash contains contaminants like mercury, cadmium, arsenic. If eaten, drunk, or inhaled, these intoxicants can cause cancer, nervous system impacts, development delays, and behavioral problems. And last week, in full disclosure, OUC has agreed to meet with us and give us more answers and look into our requests. And I'd also like to mention the City of Orlando sustainability and resiliency planning is recognized nationwide for excellence. But we also feel that the health and safety of our residents should come first. And if anybody could do better and become a model, it would be the city of Orlando. So panelists, if you could start with a round of introductions and perhaps your reaction after seeing the video. And we can start with Susan.
Wow. You know, energy can be a dirty business, and this is what we're seeing. You know, there's problems on the front end of the power generation itself. We're going to get into this discussion more, but the Orlando Utility Commission has announced that they're going to shut down those 2 coal units, and I'm going to dig in a little bit to what does that mean and how do we replace that generation. But even when they're decommissioned and down and actually being co-fired to burn more fossil fuels, to burn gas, you're still going to be living with that pollution, Piper and others in that neighborhood. So, you know, it's just astounding, really, to think, and it's not the only place. So anyway, Jennifer, why don't you pick up?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a quick introduction. Like Laura said, my name is Jen Torres. I'm the environmental organizer at Poder Latinx in Orlando. And I was in the video if y'all didn't notice, but so my reaction remains the same, right? Disappointed, not surprised that our communities are left behind in you know, the placement of these facilities and the plans to clean them up and the plans to transition to another fossil fuel, which we'll dive in, like Susan said, in a little bit down the road. And also, you know, later in the video, when you all watch the whole thing, you'll see that this is a justice issue, not only on the fossil fuel infrastructure and the pollution of the community, but also on OUC's energy practices and the energy burdens that they put on the same people that they're polluting. So that's a topic that Poder focuses on really heavily, and it's a topic that I'll dive into later on. But yeah, the video, you know, I'm so thankful that we were able to be a part of it. It definitely shines the light on both of these justice issues, and I'm excited for this conversation with you all. And I'll pass it to Piper.
Thanks. So hi, I'm Piper Vargas. I am a local resident in the east side of Orlando in Orange County, and I'm a mom, and I volunteer with Moms Clean Air Force, which is a national organization of over 1 million moms and dads, supporting the just different issues, but one of them with coal ash. So I met the video, first of all, for me, like, it gets all the feels and all the emotions because that's my life and that's my family. You can see I have 2 young boys. They're now 5 and 7. So yeah, we've been working on this for several years, trying to get answers, and I'm really excited. Laura just said that, you know, OUC has agreed to meet with us or to discuss this more. So I think that's progress in itself, if anything. I'm just grateful to be a part of this and to be helping in any way that I can. So,
Laura, just one quick addition, and I'm Susan Glickman. I'm the Florida Director of Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, and I had the distinction of working on this issue for more than 2 decades. And about 15 years ago, there were as many as 7 proposals to build new coal-fired power plants in the state of Florida, and along with a lot of other people, but I am particularly proud that we beat all those proposals back in that era. So we didn't add to the problem at that time. So I just want to mention, I'm certainly glad that we did.
That's wonderful. Good news. Thank you. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to start with Piper. And Piper, living so close to Stanton Power Plant as a mom, what is that like?
Yeah, so probably as you saw in the video, it was very concerning to me. You know, when I learned about this years ago, I had no idea what that meant to live next to a coal power plant. I moved to this side of town when I had a 3-day-old baby and a 3-year-old. So learning that pregnant women and young children are the most vulnerable to the toxins and the health concerns of living next to this waste makes me lose sleep at night. I definitely, have had to step away from this. Actually, there were a few years where I had to take a break because my mental health, I was like, okay, either we need to move away or I need to just like take a break from this, because it was like I didn't want my kids to go outside and play. And I have lots of friends and family that live even closer than I do. Their kids go to the middle school right next door. So it's just giving me a lot of anxiety. And so I mean, trying to do my part with it, but it is very scary. It's scary to know that your kids are playing in soil or at a playground or outside breathing in potentially, harmful air and fly ash on the playgrounds and in the grass. So yes, all the feels.
So what could people who run this plant be doing to protect the community on a local level?
Yeah, so like I said, as we learned, like the most concerning thing for the community is the fly ash. So as I think someone mentioned earlier that I think you might have said that it's known, that if you Google coal fly ash, it's known to have carcinogens that, like mercury, arsenic, and lead are known to be in there. So what's frustrating is that our state and federally regulated coal ash is not regulated like it should be. So we kind of met a dead end with that when we asked them, about.
Piper? I think she froze. Hopefully she'll be able to rejoin us. Okay. So I just want to add to that, that there is a bill out right now with Earth Justice.
Nobody talks about, and they're not doing the highest level of standard. There are other states, there are other coal plants that have barriers in place. So there are barriers that they put up around the piles of coal waste to contain that fly ash. There's covers, and also for the way that they transport the waste, like in trucks. There are higher standards that other states and other plants are doing that OUC is not doing, from my understanding and all the research that I have done. So we're just asking for them, like, follow through with being the greenest city and being the best, and do the best for the health of your community by protecting your families and your constituents.
And I think opening up that line of conversation, we'll be able to get answers, because we might be making assumptions as well. And to allow us to be able to have that conversation and to find out some of the information that we're reading in the reports that maybe we don't understand.
Yeah, and my biggest thing is that, I've been to the dump. You can actually, we did a tour with our family of the dump, and you go on a tour and you drive past these, and even on Innovation Way, you can drive down the road and you can see these piles of coal ash of the waste. And so, we're assuming things, right? Like we see it and it's there, but we don't see the barriers. We don't see how they're going above and beyond. So they say they are, but we want the proof, that there's not, even concerns with it leaking into water systems. There's a lot of environmental issues with the coal waste that we think they can do better from our research. So yeah, that conversation is very important. And I want to be able to sleep at night. I want to be able to not have like, okay, I can let my kids go to the playground because I know they're doing everything to protect us. And I just don't feel that way and haven't felt that way. So.
Okay. Jen, can you, I'd like to ask you, why is this a justice issue?
So like I said earlier, this is definitely a justice issue on two different sides of the same coin. We have the justice issue with the fossil fuel infrastructure that we know, it is the main contributor to the climate crisis, the rising temperatures, the extreme weather that we've been seeing, which we know disproportionately affects brown and Black communities. And, we have OUC who has decided to continue to rely on fossil fuels. And this just it's going to continue to disproportionately affect our communities. And then we also have the other side of this as a justice issue from OUC's energy practices and the energy burdens that they place on their low-income customers. And energy becomes a justice issue when companies like OUC and other utilities in the state begin to treat it as a privilege rather than a necessity that really everybody needs to survive. So when low-income customers which are primarily made up of brown and Black families, are facing higher energy burden than other people who don't live in these low-income neighborhoods, in low-income housing, and live in more affluent neighborhoods, and they're having a higher energy burden than others, then we know that there's a problem here. And this can be credited to OUC's weak energy efficiency programs. They do have some in place, but they only help less than 1% of eligible low-income customers, which, just that statistic in itself lets you all know how weak these programs are, and really like the failure of OUC to protect the customers that they're serving. And especially OUC being one of the utility companies with the highest percentage of low income customers, coming out at about 30% of their customers are low income. So you would think that their energy efficiency programs would help more than 1%. But unfortunately, this isn't the case. So, we have that side of the justice issue. We have a continued reliance on fossil fuels that means just a continued neglect and disregard for our communities, because the climate crisis is only going to continue to get worse. And this is because of companies and, just a nationwide reliance on fossil fuels. And, this isn't really what our communities need. And this isn't going to help, especially the people who are most impacted. So this is definitely a environmental justice issue when we look at it this way.
Okay. And what about OUC's process of decision making? What do you think is wrong with it, and how can it be improved?
Yeah, so we know that OUC held meetings last year and the year before that in an attempt to bring in their community to their clean energy plans that they stated in the EIRP, which the EIRP, for those of you who don't know, is their electric integrated resource plan, which is really problematic, and it was approved without or very little community support. The community who did show up to these meetings let them know that this isn't what they wanted. Again, that a continued reliance on fossil fuel is a continued neglect for people of color and the people most impacted by the climate crisis. So this plan does not set a standard or goal for rooftop solar or energy efficiency. And the core of their plan basically is to end the use of coal to generate electricity and to have no net emissions of carbon pollution. But natural gas was going to still be used for their production. So just, again, another fossil fuel. And they had meetings to bring in the community on this decision, but these meetings weren't really widely broadcasted. A lot of the people in the community didn't really know what was happening. A lot of the people who did attend these meetings were people doing this kind of work, not just individual members of the community who are most impacted by these decisions. These meetings weren't really accessible. And this isn't really a surprise. They held their last really important meeting before the vote of the EIRP in the middle of a weekday when so many working class people are working, right? And they left little room for public comment after an hours long presentation that just it wasn't feasible for working class people that, to sit on a meeting on a Tuesday for 4 hours at 2 p.m., So and this meeting was held between Thanksgiving and Christmas, which, further emphasized the low community turnout and the low input from the community. And on top of that, there wasn't any translation for Spanish speakers or other folks. And this was the last meeting before that really important vote. And it was I believe that it was definitely strategic for OUC to host these super long meetings on a weekday. And if it wasn't even for community outcry back in 2019 around these decision-making processes, OUC wouldn't have even had extra community meetings around this plan. So even today, they hold their commission meetings during the week. and they make decisions that really affect working class people, but working class people aren't present in these spaces. So aside from that, they also fail to present their reports on their main page around their compliance with health and safety standards, so that mothers like Piper and her friends and everybody else in the community can just easily access these reports. To find these reports, you have to jump through hoops and find a specific website. They're not found on their main OUC site. So this shows that they don't really care if the community knows what's going on behind the scenes, or maybe they think that we don't care enough to go looking for it. So, but our communities are becoming more aware, and they're getting more involved through organizations like ours, like yours, through people like Piper. So thank you all so much for the work that you do alongside us. It's really, really empowering to be in these kind of spaces.
Yeah, and thank you for your work, because you've been doing a great job, and a great partner with us as well. Next, I think I'm going to ask Susan, what role does energy efficiency play in all of this?
Great. It's super important. It's important for a number of reasons, and we've talked a lot about power plants, and one of the main ways that we avoid the need to build new power plants, which is what makes people's bills go up, is to capture all the cost-effective efficiency. So I'm going to concentrate a little bit and give a little bit of history to every 5-year process that happens in Florida called the Florida Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, and sort of where we started and a little bit about OUC's record on this. But I was struck by what you said, Piper, about not being able to sleep. So working on climate and energy issues for 2 decades, two things make me not sleep. One is the permafrost thawing, because we just don't know how fast, and the feedback loop, and something that has scared me for many years. And then the other is when I look at a place like the city of Orlando. The city of Orlando, who has had leadership with Mayor Buddy Dyer and a very robust sustainability office, first led by John Ipple, and then now, of course, by Chris Castro. If a city like Orlando can't sort of be held to the highest standard, and for instance, to capture all the cost-effective efficiency, the city owns the utility. There is a governing board, so there are others that are involved in these decisions. But the OUC, it's the second largest municipal utility in the state of Florida. It's the 14th largest in the entire country. And the notion behind a city-owned utility is for it to benefit its customers. So it's really a different lens than when you look at utilities like Duke Energy or Florida Power and Light or Tampa Electric, that are what's called investor-owned utilities. They cover about 75% of the state, but about 15% of the state are munis. So energy decisions, as we talked about, that you make now have really far-reaching consequences. And the consequences are your wallet, your health, and no less than the climate of the planet. And so it's very important that we need the leadership. And the second thing that keeps me up at night, that if a place like Orlando, sort of can't achieve these 100% commitments that we're making, we're in big trouble, because this is the place where we have the political will and we have the leadership. So I do want to talk about efficiency. So in the fall of 2019, that's when Florida utilities, the 3 investor-owned utilities and the 2 large municipal ones, which is Jacksonville and Orlando, go to the Florida Public Service Commission, and OUC showed up asking for a goal of 0. They asked for, that was their proposal to the commission, was to have 0 energy efficiency goals. And the wisdom of the Florida Public Services Commission was to not accept those goals. And they stuck with the goals from 5 years earlier, which was 2014 goals. And when Orlando, so it's a 2-step process, you come in and you set your goals, and then you come back the following February, and they propose their program plan. And unfortunately, the program was especially troubling, because 33% of OUC's customers are considered low income. That is the highest percentage of any utility in the state. Yet its proposed efficiency program, residential energy efficiency delivered, was projected to reach only 73 customers per year. The meager scope of the program really fails There are 72,000 families in OUC's territory that have an annual income of $35,000 or less. So even if the program only got complete full participation, that would be less than 1% of OUC's eligible customers. And that makes it the weakest program of any large utility for low income programs. So that's really quite troubling. So I want to get the history, and now I want to shift to this integrated resource plan that you talked about. And we all applaud OUC and the role that the city has played in shutting down these 2 coal units. I mean, we've already talked about that. We're going to stop that damage, hopefully clean up the damage that they've done along the way, and then move to something cleaner. But what was very distressing was that here we have this opportunity to shut down these coal units and to really take a look at what would it look like to move to 100% clean energy. So in the integrated resource plan, Orlando Utility Commission brought in Siemens to be their consultant. Siemens is a very interesting company out of Germany, and they stopped making nuclear equipment some time back as Germany itself took great strides in moving to clean energy. But they are in the gas business and they do gas equipment. And so they ran this integrated resource plan. And the general manager and CEO of OUC is Clint Bullock. And at the time, and numerous other times since, I have heard OUC claim, again, verbally and in print, that they were a state leader in efficiency programs, and they're going to meet a strategic commitment to achieve 1% of savings of retail sales in 2020. Well, the problem is there's a major discrepancy between what they say and what they have modeled. The numbers that they ran when they were, running different scenarios for this integrated resource plan was only 0.5%. And that's a really big difference. And that was sort of announced with somewhat a sense of pride. But the problem is that they were bragging they're going to invest $30 million in efficiency, yet that's half of what they were doing previously. So this is all run in a model. Not everybody's, paying attention to such things. So our energy efficiency is not where it needs to be. And then I'm going to shift from efficiency for a minute to solar. OUC paid $200,000 to the National Renewable Energy Lab, and they ran an incredibly sophisticated study about the potential for rooftop solar. And they found that there were 670 megawatts of what they called a feasible solar, 370 out of the 670 that is conservatively feasible. But yet when they ran the numbers, they put 66 in the model. So they left all this efficiency on the table. They left all this solar on the table. And now they are locking in to 20 years of more gas. And when back in the day when we were fighting coal plants, you might have heard me say that a gas plant would be half the emissions of a coal plant. Well, that would be on the best day. But when you frack the gas, when you pull the gas up, there's a methane release when they use the hydraulic fracturing process, fracking, and a gas plant can be as bad as a coal plant in the overall emissions. So this is very concerning that we would lock in for 2 decades when we haven't sort of run the numbers on that. So I think I'll just leave it at that because that was a long answer to a question, but I just sort of wanted to lay that scenario out where energy efficiency, which is the low-hanging fruit, and it affects the people who are most vulnerable because affluent people are getting more efficient every day. So it is people who are of lower income that really need the help. And the fact that OUC's projection was only going to reach 73 families, I think that's sort of easy to see that they're really leaving a lot of opportunity on the table.
Yeah. So what policies do you think would help us make energy more affordable for people?
Well, let me just say right now, there is a rulemaking underway at the Florida Public Service Commission. And one of the reasons that we get such poor outcomes My friends at the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy do a scorecard. They do multiple scorecards, but one where they compare 52 utilities nationwide. And in Florida, Tampa Electric Company ranks 46 out of 52, Duke 48 out of 52, and Florida Power and Light, our largest utility, is 51 out of 52. And that's because in this process, they deploy two antiquated cost analysis, cost benefit tests that were instituted 30 years ago. One, the rate impact measure, no other state uses it. And it's just completely outdated. And it's sort of the excuse that gets us these really, really bad outcome. And once again, this hurts the people who can least afford it. And Jennifer mentioned the notion of the high energy burden. That is the percentage of your disposable income that you pay on your energy bill. And it is the people who can least afford it. And in an era where we're seeing systematic sort of racism and also sort of economic disparities, the last thing we need is for people who are struggling to make ends meet to pay energy bills that are $100 or $200 or $300 more than they ought to be. So this is exactly where we need to help people. And we're not doing a very good job of it in Florida at all. But with a municipal utility whose mission is to help its customers, they should even be held to a higher standard.
Yeah. Okay, great answer. I wonder if the other panelists have any other thoughts that they'd like to add right now, or any comments they'd like to add? No.
Are we answering questions?
There is a question.
Because I had an answer to that.
You do have an answer. Okay.
Or a comment.
I'll read the question.
Okay.
So this is from here. Understand fly ash is bad. This said, when I read drawdown, fly ash is an ingredient in making environmentally sound concrete. Is there a double win solution here?
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment on that, and just from what I have learned about that. So my understanding is that OUC does, I don't know if they sell it or they to a nearby cement plant that creates this concrete that you're speaking of. And that was actually one of our issues and one of our questions for OUC is when they're transporting that fly ash, it's in trucks and they're going through the main streets where the neighborhoods are very close to the school. And I have a friend and other people that are part of our coalition that live in Avalon, and they've seen these trucks transporting that. And I mean, it's not covered well. It's not, so one of the issues I think with that, and they say that, they're repurposing this into concrete. I don't know all of the scientific, maybe Laura, you have more information. I don't know if you remember us looking into this, but my biggest issue with that is when they're transporting it, are they transporting it safely? And we were met at a dead end with that, where I spoke to a lady with the Florida EPA, and she said that they go onto these trucks, and if there's an issue with the trucks, we would need to file a report with the Florida Department of Transportation if they're not following some regulation. And my understanding is there is no regulation on that. So my concern with that is just, yeah, that might sound good to repurpose it that way, but if it's spreading the fly ash even further into our community, into other parts of Orlando or Central Florida or the state, I don't know how far they're transporting this fly ash. That's potentially dangerous to more people and more neighborhoods. So just one of the things that we learned during digging into this.
Does anybody else want to add to that? I know that I've read some information, but I can't cite where I've read it at this point, so I'm going to pass on that. There is another question here, and it says, what are your thoughts on reparations? Should they exist? Should property owners get reimbursed for their losses? Who should pay for the polluters, the government that allows it, or both? From at least my point of view, that's not even a thought in my mind about who should pay for what. The only thing I'm thinking about is just better solutions for the family. I don't think haven't been in any discussions that talked about people paying for any of this. If anybody else wants to jump in.
Well, I would say that people are paying for this. They're paying for it with their health. And, you know, I mean, coal is so incredibly dirty. The mercury pollution, which is not a global warming pollutant, but it is a potent neurotoxin. You know, we pay for it. Let me mention the issue of paying for pollution. You know, right now, we all subsidize polluters to pollute for free. Now, whether it's sort of the more traditional pollution like we've been talking about here, or it's global warming pollution, because, you know, Florida, we're feeling the heat and we're paying the price already. The Florida legislature just passed legislation to deal with sea level rise. That's going to be $100 million a year. The governor was talking about $1 billion over 4 years. I mean, those are results of our greenhouse gas emissions. So what we need to do policy-wise is we need to stop subsidizing the polluters to pollute for free. It makes me a little crazy when people talk about, or even candidates for office and others, particularly at the federal level, how much money they're going to spend on climate and or adapting or clean energy. I'm like, let's just stop, you know, subsidizing polluters to pollute for free. Why don't we just stop with that and subsidizing this fossil fuel industry? So we have not accounted for health. We call it an externality, but absolutely, and we know it now, COVID is a respiratory virus, right? So when you take an internal combustion engine off the road or shut down a coal plant, you're protecting people's public health. And we, in the United States, as a society, has not put the value on the health impacts and what people ultimately pay, you know, with their health and out of their pockets. And people who, you know, are breathing in gas from gas stoves are more likely to have COVID. They're more likely to end up with asthma and end up in a hospital. So these are, you know, causal things that we know about. So, you know, we need to clean up, and the people who have polluted and who've made money off this are the ones that need to pay for that.
I like that answer. Okay, we have some questions in the Q&A box. So I'll start with the one on the top. Is FNL PSC still accepting comments? What type of advocacy do you suggest to put leverage on the PSC to move forward with more efficient practices?
So you asked, this was the Public Service Commission, and I put in the chat box a link to a page, energysmartfl.com, and that will take you to a sample letter to send to the Florida Public Service Commission about energy efficiency and modernizing that. There is a strong historical record for utilities getting up to 1%. Austin Energy, which is a municipal, a lot like OUC, also has leadership. You know, they get more than 1%. In New Orleans, they are on track to deliver 2% annually. So the Florida Public Service Commission, it's not that we can't do this, it's that we lack the political will because of the influence of these industries that make money not doing it, right? You know, Upton Sinclair says, don't expect a man to understand that which he is paid not to understand. So when my colleagues who are more technical than I got into a conversation with the Orlando Utilities Commission staff after a number of meetings, the efficiency staff finally said to us, we don't know how to get to 1%. Well, Austin Energy knows how to get to 1%, and New Orleans knows how to get to 2%. And on and on and on. So we invite, it was very interesting on the day of that workshop that you mentioned, that multi-hour workshop during the middle of the day, it was announced that there'll be an energy efficiency potential study, which struck me as being very odd, that why wouldn't we do the study before we actually do the integrated resource plan, right? Wouldn't you do that naturally? But we would love to work with OUC, and if they aren't quite sure how to get to 1%, certainly Southern Alliance for Clean Energy and the American Council for Energy Efficient Economy and a lot of other groups could help them. So, you know, someone asked about reparations. It's a much broader conversation, but there does need to be consideration of these past practices, and whether it's putting coal ash into an unlined pond or, you know, instituting power plants that we didn't need and don't need to build. But we can ill afford any more miscalculations on energy anymore. You know, we are past 418 parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. And President Biden just announced they're going to halve again emissions by 2030, right? So we either are with the program or we're not with the program, and we know how to get there, and we just need the political will. So I invite OUC, you know, to embrace groups like Clio and PODER-X and Moms Clean Air Force and Southern Alliance Clean Energy, and work with us, because we're really all on the same team here.
Okay, that's great. So the next question was for Susan. What should OUC be doing or be doing better? I think you just kind of answered that. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
Before we lock into 20 years of methane fracked gas, we need to run the numbers. And it was just absolutely astounding to me how this process went, and the fact that they never ran the numbers. It's just sort of stupefying. So if they didn't do it, then they meant to not do it. So that's what they need. They needed political pressure, and it's just not okay to do that. So, you know, we know how to do this. The fact that OUC's efficiency program is the only program that requires low-income people to actually pay into the program. I mean, you know, when I say it out loud, it sort of doesn't even, you know, pass the laugh test. So, you know, let's just start with a clean piece of paper, and let's do the right thing and help the community save money. I mean, you can save 23% on your electric bill with a high efficiency air conditioner. I mean, let's, you know, I will say with much kudos to Orange County and the city of Orlando that offer financing through SELF, the Solar and Energy Loan Fund. So we know how to finance that for people, even in LMI, low and middle income communities. So there is a lot we can do. It's just a matter of having the will, and it cannot be about locking in more fossil gas.
Wonderful. Okay, and next we have another question. I'm going to direct this towards Jen, I think. What can an average citizen do? Can they reach out to the mayor, OUC, EPA?
Yeah, so there's a lot that us as individuals can do. Prior to working with Poder, I worked at Wawa. So I just started getting into this kind of work. But before I was, you know, actively involved in the organization, I volunteered a lot of the free time that I did have to getting involved with community organizations who are doing this kind of work, talking to my neighbors and my family about the things that are going on, especially for our Latinx and like other minorities. A lot of the times our families are very unaware of the things that go on in our own backyards. And the first, you know, the first step into getting power in community is to talk to the community. So, and that's on an individual level. So that's just something that I do. Aside from that, on the more technical side that you were asking, yes, you can reach out to your elected officials and urge them to, you know, think about the community when they're passing energy efficiency programs, to listen to the community when they're making or they're passing such important, making such important decisions like the passage of the implementation of the EIRP. And as far as the EPA, you know, that is a big concern. The fact that OUC is allowed to, you know, have these coal piles and continue this is because of the EPA's regulations, and they're short or there's like their weak enforcement and regulations around coal ash. So that is definitely something that you can do, is reach out to the EPA and ask them to, you know, pass stronger regulations around coal ash. And that's something that Poder is going to be looking into. And hopefully we can, you know, urge the EPA to do that. So if you want to get involved with us, you can check out, I'll drop it in the link, our landing page on, you can come to our community meetings. You can just email me directly. I'm very reachable. So, and I know Piper wanted to add in on this, so I'm going to hand it off to Piper.
Thanks. Yeah, everything that you said. I just wanted to say, I also, when I started this about 4 years ago, I was a stay-at-home mom with 2 little kids, and it just takes awareness, like you said. When I became aware of this, that was like my mission, was to make sure that all of my friends, my church community, everyone that I knew was aware of what that meant and what that was in our neighborhood. And through working as a field consultant with Moms Clean Air Force for a year and a half, I met with our senators. So you know what? These people, OUC, they work for us. Okay, they're owned by the city of Orlando. If you are an Orange County resident, if you live in the city of Orlando, we pay for that. They work for us. We are their constituents. And that was the most powerful thing that I learned, was that I have a right to go to their meetings. Someone mentioned before, they make it difficult because I think it's a Tuesday at 2 p.m. So for most working people, it's very hard. But I was able to go. I would actually bring my kids with me to these meetings because they're also the reason that I was there. I would encourage you to write to your local officials. So our representative, Darren Soto, I've met with him several times. He is aware. We are asking more from him on this. So write to him. You can meet with his office. Our senators, our state senators, also our mayors, Mayor Demings and Buddy Dyer. Write to them, go to their meetings, and ask for answers. And then with that, we have lots of organizations, the ones that are here speaking, and there are others that are doing this work on the ground that you can join. Moms Clean Air Force, I'm sure they'll put a link up. We can put a link up somewhere, hopefully. You can join. There's a group of moms on the east side, the coalition that we're part of. We would love for you to join us in getting this word out, and coming with us to meet with our local representatives, because that's what makes a difference, is that when we are aware and we stand up and we ask these questions, they have to answer us like they work for us. So, yeah.
All right, thank you. And I'd like to make an announcement, and that is there is more to come. That this is just a preview, and that there will be a longer short film that will look into the energy burden that we've just talked about today. And to stay tuned, follow us, follow Porter, Jobs for Justice, Sierra Club, and I would like to thank BOLO and Florida Climate Week organizers for this event. So thank you.
And wrapping up, Laura, I just wanted to say something. Margaret Mead, who is a very historically famous anthropologist, said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." So I'm really heartened, Piper and Jennifer and Laura, to be with you all here today. And you just have to apply pressure. And the only thing I wanted to add to you, Piper, is run for office. That's what we need, people to run for office and to resist the temptation to be influenced by just the powerful industries and the money and what goes on, because there are some things that are just more important than that. And having clean air and clean water and a climate that is hospitable to life is all that matters. So.
Totally agree. Thank you for that. That was great. Thank you. All right, I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you again.
Great. Thank you.